I don't know what your view of the future is. Whether you fancy a very future-y one or a very pastoral one. Is it sheep and hemp undergarments? Or is it robots and obelisks talking to space?
What do you want?
Ceasefire!
Who's doing it?
Now!
What do you want?
Ceasefire!
Who's doing it?
Now!
End the occupation 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 now!
Now you're a sensible person. Everyone says it. You have a concern for the shape of the futures ahead of us. You want to do some good. But as a sensible person, perhaps as quite a generalist, you can feel very prey to feeling like you're not doing enough. Am I right? Do you relate? I do all the time. It's part of the axis of privilege, my friend, if you get to choose your fight. Eventually, soon enough, life hands you one, carries you away with something that happens to you, your mind, your body, someone you love, the place where you live. It's quite normal in history to get swept up by history's events, the horrors, the traumas. It's quite weird for us as a generation to be watching so many others being pushed through it elsewhere.
We are all Palestinians! Free Palestine!
As change makers, as artists, as people fighting a good fight, as ordinary us lot, just trying to make a difference. When do you fight? When do you pray? When do you make? When do you run away? Well, there isn't an easy answer for that, but that's part of the encouragement, I think. You get to decide, just like you do your identity.
End the occupation now!
End the occupation now!
End the occupation now!
I've written recently of the issue that I found paralysing to write about and talk about. It's nothing to do with me directly. I have distant friends connected, and I've been to this place in the past and tried to do some encouraging work to people who live there, and it changed my life in doing so. I felt all these years that I took much more than I gave in visiting Israel. I'm not Arab or Jewish, haven't been there in a very long time, almost 20 years last time I visited for a friend's wedding, but I felt helpless in trying to speak about this. But the world is on its feet in a way it hasn't been before for Palestinians.
Free Palestine! Free
Palestine!
Free
Palestine!
Free
Palestine!
1, 2, 3, 4!
Occupation no more!
1, 2, 3, 4!
Occupation no more!
Interesting that you can see people in town here kind of get it.
5, 6, 7, 8!
This is such a specific sounding issue that we've had in student unions all our lives, all of us. That never goes away. But the eruption of violence that Israel's unleashed on Gaza is worse than ever. 22,000 people dead as we do this, and more. Thousands more injured. And it's being supplied by the UK government and the US government to prop up a world order that is fundamentally unsustainable, and that's a huge part of why I'm here, why I've picked this fight to sort of stand here meekly as a polite Englishman. Well, you know, politeness has been the hallmark of a lot of dictators over the years, right? It's the gentleman owes a lot to the dungeon under the ballroom, right? I don't know whether your view of the future is really future-y or pastoral. I think mine's sort of both. its sheep and its space obelisks. But there's plenty of talk about pastoral idylls in the work of right-wing activists. A couple of weeks ago, a couple of kilometres that way, the protest group, led by donkeys, laid out some clothing, some very small clothing. One set of garments for every child they claim has been killed in Gaza by the Israeli military since 7th of October. The line of clothing started just this side of Bournemouth Pier, here on my home beach, and it stretched all the way to Sandbanks. It's the best part of 5 kilometres. 11,500 little lives gone through military violence. Why should we have to accept the idea that we cannot hold a Jewish child's life as precious at the same time as holding a Palestinian child's life as just as precious? And not just notionally, but practically, in the choices we make and the things we accept. Why can we not hang on to the warning memory of what Nazi leaders did to the Jewish people and others in the Second World War? Attempted extermination. Why can we not hang on to that simultaneously with challenging the modern Israeli government for basically doing the same thing to people in Gaza? It's a deceit to say that we can't or shouldn't. It's a deceit of our economics, fundamental to the way we value everything in the modern world. No one is of intrinsic value. If you as a people are not a strategic asset, then you can be cleared into the sea. And no one will really mind. I accidentally watched 2 films back to back a couple of days back, Friday afternoon into the evening. Dror Moray's The Gatekeepers from about 10 years ago, and Wim Wenders' Anselm. And they tended to quite a 1-2 for me. Moray's film interviews some 5 former heads of Israel's security force. And it sets up a context you'd assume it would, that they have this difficult task to keep Israelis safe against a constant threat of terrorism. They all sort of said their own version of a similar thing, that very soberly you hope you've done enough work and you have to at some point in a moment give an order and people will die. And you hope that it will be, as a result, fewer people on your side. And then you work out how to live with it later. It's a good and simple and noble story, and difficult for those doing it, right? Every single one of them by the end
said there comes a point when you create a rolling machine of violence. And once you do start targeting the hate speakers and those creating a culture of violence on that side, you're opening the doors to just everybody being collateral, everybody being a target. We've ended up being far too cruel, said one of them. Israeli secret police. Wim Wenders' film is looking at a German post-war artist, Ansel Kiefer, and the film introduces us lushly to these huge pitted landscapes, semi-impressionistic, that he makes, with these scorched black marks and these pitted snowscapes, landscapes of destruction and emptiness and weariness. Big pieces. From a very successful post-war German artist, and he made a name for himself in the 70s by challenging Germany's history, recent then, of fascism.
End the occupation now!
End the occupation now!
End the occupation now!
End the occupation!
I have said that, to me, when I think of Germany, I think of a country that took a big swing at looking hard at itself after the war. But I've been reminded that this didn't happen quickly. It's hard to question who you think you are. But it's one of the few big choices we get in life, to decide who we are. You get that choice. Only you can describe your identity, nobody else. So if there's something about you that seems sacred to who you think you are, did you just inherit that? Or have you wrestled with it? I've been wrestling with just being another bystander. What have I had to fight for? Honestly, I find protest very hard. I'm not a natural protester. But I have heard so many Jewish voices standing up for the rights of Palestinians, throwing their passionate conviction, their time, their bodies into the way of the idea that what's happening in Gaza can in any way help them, help Israeli security, its right to exist, Jewish identity. It's another deceit. And if the US supports and equips the Netanyahu government to do what it's doing, to systematically clear out people from their land, an attempted extermination is exactly what it looks like. If the US government supports that, is it ultimately because America itself was formed that way? Partly due to people from my own country.
Who we are is not entirely dictated by where we were born and to whom and what they did. All of us are given this sort of impossible task of trying to edit who we are in different circumstances to our parents. Honouring the things that help make us us, and having the courage to get rid of some sacred seeming things that just honestly aren't. Sacred ideas of the land we grew up in and who it made us to be. The stories of us passed down.
Ideas of nationhood, ideas of security, ideas of our own identity are some of the sacred things we're going to have to give up to build new futures. Or they're not going to happen. What do we talk about
when we talk about the future? And can anyone in a refugee camp have such a conversation? Is it the only topic of conversation in there? Futurists and forward thinkers might frame the topic of war in terms of risk analysis, or they might frame cultural conflict through the lens of narrative trends. But this conflict in Gaza has helped me see in a new way that we have to show up for the futures we want. We have to embody them. So what if that meant showing up on a street next to someone specific at a particular point in time, holding their placard with them for their issue that isn't yours, because you can see that what they're facing, the injustice, the challenge, is a component of the future that you want in some way. And it just strikes a chord then and there.
We're all going to have to get used to showing up to things, just putting bodies into spaces to say, I stand with you. And we don't have to have everything in alignment. But we've got to stand up for the futures that we want. And that means not turning a blind eye every time. But sometimes walking down our own high streets past normal brands and business as usual to stand up for a future that we want that doesn't include indiscriminate slaughter and place destruction of whole peoples just because they're worth nothing. They're in the way of the zero-sum game. We can't live like that. That's not how we will survive this. That's not how any of us get out of this.
Because of course, if one group of people can be bulldozed in one circumstance, so could you in another. This is obvious. And you're not siding against another. You're standing with people who in that moment symbolise a need or a suffering, an injustice that must be rectified in the future that you want to embody, you want to work for.
We've got to start voting in people who want to build peace and sustainability.
I don't have enough eyes to watch all that's going on. I don't have enough skin to put in all the games. You can't do it all, but sometimes you do have to perhaps step up just outside your passion adjacent, because you can see something is symptomatic of what you care about, even though it's not happening to you. And in this fight I have against perfectionism, same thing that gives us all ideas of purity, racial or political or ideological of any kind, stems back to the same root that wants to divide us for other people's power. It's bullshit, of course. Just like the idea that by marching for Palestinians and against the blatantly genocidal scale of violence and retribution and wholesale destruction and humiliation and vengeance that Israel is simply unleashing on Gaza, undeniably. And to stand up for that and say, this is not in my name. My government may supply the arms, but I do not agree. That somehow doing that is to deny the suffering and the sacred loss of those 1,000 people who were killed by Hamas that started this round of the conflict. It's bullshit. Them or them, us or them, you or me. I'm very conscious of resisting the outrage machine. It's another fundamental part of our economics. Because in a way, a primary cultural challenge for you and me right now is to rise above that, to culturally make a different choice in our heads and to begin the process of recovery from the addiction to drama. Love isn't outraged, is it? Love isn't defensive, it's confident. But love is an act. It's a choice to step up, to identify with, and to speak up, or to step back and enable someone else to be heard. Confident. Imagine if that attitude was sacred to us. Imagine the futures we'd make. We need a whole new idea of what nationhood is, one that perhaps leads us beyond it altogether in the future. We are who and where we are now. All of us inevitably obsolete as time goes on. All we can do is try and hold space for each other and for change in our own minds and hearts. Give each other courage to explore new stories of us, taking what we need from our ancient heritages and what we need from our modern, machine-learnt identities that we're also all part of. What if we had no shame in putting those things together? The hemp and the circuits. To protect and build and envision a future that was sustainable, that we could keep doing. Go on the march sometimes, and don't worry if you don't know the whole credo, and don't think you've got to sign up to everything. You're being a human by standing with somebody in that hour. And maybe it will lead you to do some other things that do get closer and closer to your passion, or maybe they won't. This is how I'm processing it as somebody with a lot of freedom and privilege, as somebody with a big interest in how we talk about the future and what we do creatively to envision the futures we want. You have to start with what you see and where you are and what you know today. If you don't stand, you might be washed away.
In our thousands, in our millions,
We are all Palestinians!